Another beautiful day here. My name is AKPOMIEMIE Erujaroh. Once again, I welcome you to my studio. If this is your first time of joining me, it's a pleasure to have you here. If you're returning, even better. Thank you for dropping by. As you might have guessed, if this is your first time, I'm an artist, and this is what I love doing. Trying to bring together art, a bit of history, and culture. Today, we're going to work on the second volume of my works. The last video I posted was on volume 1, which is the part of my bookshelf series. Today, as promised, we're going to do volume 2, which is this painting here. As you can see, it's quite sizable, although not as big as the last one. This one is smaller, but just like the last one, it's done in oil. I love to do oil. It's not dated yet. You will see why it's not yet been dated, because it is an uncompleted work. Anyway, if I may just recap, on the last video, I introduced to you some books I've read over the years, books that have helped to shape my outlook on life, my perspective. And I thought I would share some of these titles with you and see if there are titles you've read before, or invite you to maybe introduce them to other people. We covered extensively some of those titles. We couldn't read them all, but today let's see how far we can go this time in the short space of time we've got. So this collection here, like I said, it's over the years. So I'm going to start with the major one, because the theme is more about Africa, history of Africa, which to a great extent has been greatly manipulated, distorted by the powers that be. And it is hoped that lost history will one day be fully rediscovered by the Africans. So let us start with a book here called the UNESCO General History of Africa, Volume 1 to 8. This is quite a voluminous book, well, set of books, Volume 1 to 8. And you have to really love your history to want to get into that one. But it is worth it, you know. It's quite a great read. I mean, if it's too much for you, one volume at a time. What is unique about this book, UNESCO General History of Africa, is that it's a book not by just one author, but by quite, well, I don't even know how many, but quite a number of historians came together, intellectuals. What happened was, because it was published in the 70s. In the 60s, after Africa got independence, many Africans got their independence, one thing that greatly troubled our visionary leaders back then was that awareness that our history has been greatly distorted. So African leaders back then, the likes of Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, Zik of Nigeria, Nkrumah, Nyerere, they approached the United Nations and say, please, we want the world to know our history the way it really is, and not this misrepresentation that's all over the place. So graciously, the United Nations agreed, and the United Nations sponsored and commissioned the writing of this book. Fantastic read. I say volume 1 to 8, so it is worth looking into. A comprehensive, detailed history of Africa, and it is highly recommended. But if it's too big for you, too chunky, I wouldn't blame you if you want to shy away from it. A compressed version of the history of Africa, you'll find it here. This is When We Rule by Robin Walker. Robin Walker is a fantastic historian. He's not an African, but when it comes to the history of Africa, this man is an authority. He got it. He done the even a newer edition of this book. So if you get it now, you will get even maybe more information than I did the first time around. But I highly recommend this book, Robin Walker. It's a great historian. Below Robin Walker's book, we have a book here called CASELY-HAYFORD. That's the name of the author, is The Lost Kingdoms of Africa. Now, this is another book that I greatly recommend. Before the coming of the Europeans, one has to understand that Africa, because this modern nation statehood we have today with distinct clear borders is European. It's a European concept. It was over Africa. Before the coming of the Europeans, Africa, we had empires, great empires, smaller empires. Some of these great empires, in these great empires, you have some smaller kingdoms within. So it was in various sizes. Massive kingdoms like Songhai Empire, for example, was larger than Europe. Mali, massive. Ghana, massive. Benin, Benin, for example, the Benin Empire, if we look at that, the capital city of that empire, it measured approximately 400 square miles. Now that 400 square miles is against Paris, central Paris, which is only 41 square miles. So that gives you an idea what these empires were like. They were massive, they were well organized, well run, and it was a whole different thing before the Europeans came and started to break things up. They break up, of all these various kingdoms, you had about over 10,000 distinct societies, but this was broken down by the Europeans, and we are all aware of the Berlin Wall. Now, with the Berlin Wall, things just, if you look at the map of Africa today, you see it's a bit like the map of the United States. You got straight lines here, straight lines there. The map of Egypt for today is zoop, zoop. Like somewhere you can see some of this, somebody went there with a ruler, just drew lines, cut off Egypt, cut off Sudan, cut off Libya, and it's all over the place in many African countries today. All these artificial borders that has greatly separated us. I'll say it's just like America after the Europeans wiped out the indigenous people, and then you see America is like kind of boxes, lines. That's how Africa is today. If I take this partitioning of Africa, believe it or not, the consequences is still with us today. All over Africa today, be it from Somalia to DRC, you always have all these border problems, and it is because of these artificial borders. In my country, Nigeria, we share a border with Cameroon. So you can be in Nigeria, live in Nigeria, and go to work in Cameroon, or work in Cameroon, live in Nigeria. So you always have this, when you have all these artificial borders, it affects the way people relate and all that. And if one might even go a bit deeper, talking about all these artificial borders and their consequences Africa has suffered, still suffers today, the truth about it is that we have so many countries in Africa that, in the true sense of the word, they're not viable nation states. They're so small. Take a country like Gambia, for example. Gambia, it's inside Senegal. It's as if Senegal just embraces Gambia. It's the same thing with Eswatini. Eswatini just in the middle of South Africa. Inside South Africa, a country inside a country. We have some other countries that are so small. I would say you take countries like Togo and Benin, for example. Now, Nigeria and Ghana, we have a great relationship. But one funny thing one will find out about the relationship of Ghana and Nigeria is both countries, it's as if they seem to ignore Togo and Benin, two tiny countries that are just plunked in the middle. They just, it's like kind of talking over their heads, it's as if they're not there. and it's incredible. You know, you have all this whole thing there that is so anyway, I'll invite you to look into CASELY-HAYFORD's Lost Kingdoms for you to see some of these fantastic kingdoms we had all over Africa. How, because he gives you photographs, he also gives you a brief history of these individual kingdoms. So by all means, please have a look at that book, Lost Kingdoms of Africa. Now, below here, we come to a book here called The African Origin of Civilization, Cheikh Anta Diop. I spoke about Cheikh Anta Diop the last time on volume 1, but again, let me just repeat, because this is one of his, he wrote lots of great books, but this is one of his most notable, I should say, African Origin of Civilization, Myth or Reality. He presents the facts for you to decide, is it a myth, is it a reality, and then you see for yourself. And it's, I mean, there's so much one could say about Cheikh Anta Diop, but I will talk about Cheikh Anta Diop maybe later, because if we want to talk about Cheikh Anta Diop, wow, we're going to be here for a long time, but it is worth exploring. Cheikh Anta Diop's work, the African Origin of Civilization as we know it today. Below Cheikh Anta Diop, we got John Henry Clark. I mentioned Diop again here. John Henry Clark and Joseph Johannikan, popularly called Dr. Ben. I told you about Dr. Ben the last time when I introduced his book, The Black Man of the Nile and His Family. I also talked to you about John Henry Clark. Fantastic historian. These 3 books, the reason I didn't put titles is because these men that have written extensively on the history, hidden, lost, forgotten, or undermined history of Africa. So any books by these men, by all means, please watch, look after them. If it's even an article, an essay, hey, once you see, just read these guys' books. They're fantastic. They're fantastic. Over here, there's a book here. I have to mention him anyway. Kaba, Professor Kaba. Professor Kaba Kameni. He's in the last volume I mentioned his book, which was the spirituality before religions, where he really, Professor Kaba is a fantastic writer. He really goes deep. He seems to be more interested on the spiritual side of things, and he does a great work in bringing all these things together. You read his work and then you come to realize a lot of things you never thought before. You never saw the missing dots when it comes to spirituality, religion, and society today. Kaba does a great work. This book here is called Shabaka Stone. Shabaka Stone, it's one of the prominent exhibitions at the British Museum today. I've visited this museum a few times, but it was through thanks to Professor Kaba that I looked into it more closely. And Kaba talks a great deal about the Shabaka. He explains it. You know, the Shabaka stone was I think it was discovered. It was found about 2,700 years ago. 2,700 years ago, and it deals mainly with the MOLEFI theory and the story about creation. Like I said in the previous presentation, the Shabaka stone is one of those artifacts that helps to buttress the fact that the ancient Kemetans, they themselves, they claim, they said they came from an even older civilization. And through this Shabaka stone, Professor Kaba breaks it down, all about the MOLEFI theories, basically the story of creation. Now, I won't say this is the only, well, definitely not the only story of creation, neither is it the first. It is, from the Egyptian perspective, is in the beginning God said, just like what we have in the Abrahamic traditions really, God said, let there be light and creation and all that. since the beginning of time, you realize that all great peoples in the world, man has always wanted to get to grasp with the phenomenon of life. What makes things happen? What are all these things beyond our control? The universe, man has always been mystified by the whole concept of life, creation, and all that. And to help to understand this phenomenon, all peoples seems to come with their own creation stories to help in explaining these things. So the concept of God and all that. I mean, the Egyptians, they had their own, which is the Osirian drama, from whence came many other religious practices. As Dr. Ben wrote a fantastic book called, it's not here, a fantastic book called, I think it's Ancient Egypt, Mother of All Western Civilizations. So many of his books, but I think that is the title, Ancient Egypt, Mother of All Western religions. Yeah, all Western religions. He really digs it down. So you always have all these creation stories by different people. All over Africa, it varies, the Ga of Ghana, the Ewes in Nigeria, the Yorubas. We all have, I must say, one of my favorite, I won't go into it, but one of my favorite, I like the Kenyan creation story. It's a bit more rich, more in depth than, my opinion anyway, than the Adam and Eve story. So even if you have the persuasion of the Adam and Eve, know that is one creation story. There are other creation stories. So Professor Kaba, my goodness, he breaks it down and explains this MIFA theory through the Shabaka, through what is written on the Shabaka stone. So it's highly recommended. Let me come up here. There's a book here that it will help. Well, before I come to this book, let me just talk a little bit. This is The Lost Light and interpretation of ancient scriptures by ALVIN by KUHN. There's also the pyramid text. The pyramid text, again, too, is like the coffin text or the Egyptian Book of the Dead. We spoke quite a lot about the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which some publishers, take note, go by the name of the Book of Coming Forth by Day and by Night. So it's all that kind of whole spirituality of the ancient times. When you look at all the spirituality of ancient times, you see lots of their imprints in modern day religions. Quite fantastic. There is the Natural Genesis by Gerald Massey. Gerald Massey, remember the last volume, he gave us Egypt, the light of the world, where we spoke about that again too. Is all that religious tenets. Good to look into it. Again, we'll come to our good friend here, Robert BAUVAL. BAUVAL and BROPHY, they've been working quite closely together. They've done lots of works together. That last one, it was the Black Genesis. This book he just focuses this book on the works of IMHOTEP. IMHOTEP, I think, what you want to know everything about IMHOTEP, this is your book. And I think IMHOTEP is one of those names that every school child, boy and girl, regardless of race, you have to know IMHOTEP. IMHOTEP, he was a physicist, he was an architect, he was an astronomer, he was everything. Famously, he was the one that gave us the world's first building structure in the form of the step pyramids. The step pyramids which he built for King Zosa. So there's so much to say about IMHOTEP that I'm still working on a painting. I want to do a painting of IMHOTEP. So maybe when I come to that, I will talk more about IMHOTEP. But I think it is great to look into IMHOTEP. Robert Bauval. Robert Bauval is one of those great. I think, well, you cannot call Robert Bauval, you cannot pin Robert Bauval to any nationality because I call Robert Bauval Mr. United Nations. He's a bit Egyptian, Italian, French. He's everything, you know. United Nations compressed in one is Robert Bauval. He's a fantastic writer already. Now, here, there is a book here, it's not that visible. It's called The Miseducation of the Negro, Kotujo Woodson. Now, I thought I would come to this book because this book, for goodness, this book has to be, it's not a big book, not a little book, but has to be one of the most painful books I've ever read. In the sense that over the years, I have been seeing, I think I've been seeing, reading things that were actually affecting my subconscious mind to miseducate me. And this is something that has a great deal of long-term effects. Today, all over the African world, when I'm saying the African world, I mean Africa, Africans in the diaspora, the Americas, the Caribbeans, and all over the place, or Asia and everywhere, all over the world really. The truth about the matter is, in the words of with Nobles, he said, we now have a shattered consciousness and a fractured identity. And that is because over the years, over the centuries, systematically we've been brainwashed. We've been brainwashed, and this brainwashing is done in a very subtle way. It is done subliminally, and because it is so powerful, it delays that threshold of consciousness so much so that you are not even aware that it is happening. The inferiority complex that results from it is incredible. In our educational system, in our entertainment, in our interaction, you have all these things there, but we're so blinded, we don't see them. And the consequences of it, oh my goodness, you know. This miseducation of the Negro, Kotujo Woodson, he came to this realization from his time as an educationist and social observer in America in the 30s or 40s, I think, long time ago. But it is still happening even today. You know, in America, it is still happening today, the miseducation of the Negro. Now, why I say this book, I'm troubled by this book. Obviously, I'm not an American, but whatever this thing has done to the Americans, it is even worse what it has done to the Africans. I mean, it is terrible. The Americans seems to be a bit more aware because, according to what's his name, Professor Smalls, James Smalls, say we live in the belly of the beast. But we Africans, we don't live in the belly of the beast. We have become our own jailers, so to speak, the jailers of our consciousness. And why I find it so troubling is because sometimes, well, basically, we, the Americans, African Americans, they don't have a say in their, because of the demographics and size. They cannot really have that impact on their curriculum. But we Africans, we control our educational system. We can change all these things within a generation. But we can't seem to get our act together, so to speak, and do these changes. That is why I find it so troubling. And apart from our educational curriculum, which is Western, all the way through, religion has made it, oh God. When it comes to religion, it's as if we've completely lost the plot. It is just incredible where we have religious leaders. Sometimes I watch the society where we see religion and how religious leaders use religion to manipulate the people. I mean, it goes from one spectrum whereby you see so-called religious people. I won't call them scholars because they're not scholars. They like to call themselves men of God. Anyway, these religious people, how they milk the congregation because everything is about money, money, prosperity, money to make the people. And sometimes when I see some of all these religious people, well, nine times out of 10, they're very eloquent, very persuasive, but they're not only talking to the gullibles, they're talking to highly learned men and women, highly educated. Yet they just could win these people mercilessly in the name of religion. And that is one extreme. You go to another extreme, that is more common, sad to say, among the Muslims, where you see you have such religious bigotry, where you have people that will go out there, kill their fellow man in the sincere belief that they are doing God a favor. I mean, that's why I say our miseducation, my goodness, it has done us a great deal of harm in Africa. And like I say, this thing is so I can't even say the word now, subliminal in the way it seeps into the mind that we're not even aware of it. But the consequences, the effect is just devastating. Now, let me talk about my own country, for example. Use my country as an example, Nigeria, right? Not because I'm a Nigerian. I'll use Nigeria because Nigeria is the giant of Africa with the most populous, over 230 million people. I mean, we're the giant of Africa. So, using my country for example, because I say this, because of this miseducation, our curriculum, embarrassed to say, there is this inherent inferiority complex, whereby, sometimes when you meet there, you have the individual, in most cases, has a great deal of high personal self-esteem, but that high personal esteem the individual has, Nigerian has for himself, he does not always transfer that onto his fellow man or other people around the world, other Africans around the world. There's that thing there that what is ours is not superior. Superior has to come from the outside. What is from the outside is superior, is more valued. I'm not going to talk about something like, because something like maybe skin coloration, or that is as if that battle is going to take a long time to win. That problem of skin coloration that is affecting Africans everywhere. Not only in Africa, I mean, sometimes I see it in the Caribbean, it's incredible. Anyway, let's not go into skin coloration or this foolishness of our beautiful African women are proud to wear the hair of other people, sometimes dead people, to cover their own hair. I mean, it's incredible, I'm not talking about artificial now. It is that whole fashion, it's all part of the mind, that our consciousness. That is, again, when Noble says, it is a shattered consciousness, a fractured identity. Anyway, come back to my country, Nigeria, for example, now, right? When I say this thing is not the gullible amongst us that is being misled, but the highly learned people. So we'll make an example now, say the judiciary arm of government in my country now. Since after independence, sometimes I am so embarrassed when I see members of the legal profession. I'm talking of the Supreme Court, my country's Supreme Court judges. I mean, you know what it means to be a Supreme Court judge. You're not a silly person. You were highly learned. Some of these people, they've traveled far and wide. I mean, a Supreme Court judge, then you see them wearing these silly, blonde-colored wigs inherited from Europe. What on earth has that got to do with the judgment that you're going to pass? What has that got to do with the judiciary? Oh, it doesn't really matter, it's traditions. Why do you prefer that tradition? I mean, great thanks to what is happening in Burkina Faso. This man, the new president came, Captain Traoré. No, we don't need all this foolishness. Get rid of it. Today, you have to be proud of the people of Burkina Faso. Their judges look royally African. It just takes just a shift. Why? I mean, Africa is so hot. You put this silly. It's not only the judiciary, the Supreme Court. So the entire judiciary will go dressed like English. What does that got to do with, you know? This is all part of the subconscious inferiority that what is from the outside, it has to be better than what we have. That is just the judiciary, the Supreme Court, and the entire legal profession of the country. Now, you could say, well, that is just, okay, look at our presidency. How many people would believe today that Nigeria produces cars? Yes, they say made in Nigerian cars, Innocent Motors. Not many people know that. Cars are produced in Nigeria. And these cars produced in Nigeria by Nigerian engineers and technocrats, they take into account our road conditions, which are not perfect, our road conditions, so our cars are supposed to be more durable. But can you believe it, that my country's president will not be found dead in a Nigerian-made car? Our country's president will rather drive a car that comes all the way from Europe. Their preferred choice is the ones from the Germans. Many occasions you see the ones from England, Rolls Royces and Mercedes. Sometimes they go far to get cars from Japan. I mean, can you imagine an American president driving a car from if Canada is producing cars, I don't know, but American president doesn't want to have a Canadian car. The British government officials, they will have nothing to do with French cars. This is summer. Summer, you can swim. There's a competition, you swim the channel, you can swim from here to Germany to France. It would similarly, the French will not touch a British car. The German will not touch an Italian car. Not because they hate all their neighbors, but because they want to promote themselves. There is an element of self-pride, which we don't seem to have. I mean, can you imagine the Swedish economy without Volvo? The South Korean economy without well, they got a collection of them now, or Germany without Mercedes, America without Ford, Japanese without Toyota or Mitsubishi. And many people might not know this, but African countries, Nigeria specifically, produces vehicles. We're only a few steps away from producing our own trains, and hopefully one day our own aircrafts. But because of this deep-seated miseducation where inferiority complex seems to blind us. Anyway, let me leave that subject. But I recommend highly that you look into this book, The Miseducation of the Negro, because it is the same problem the Americans had, only the African one in Africa is taken to the nth degree. So it's one of those books that when I finished reading, it made me a bit a bit depressed. But one good thing is a problem is only solved when you are aware of the problem, because if you don't if you're not aware, of this what's his name? An American philosopher. I've forgotten his first name, but his surname is Fuller, because he's all part of white supremacy. He say, not until you understand white supremacy, everything else you understand will confuse you. And I think this is what this education of the Negro breaks down. Anyway, please look into that book. I cannot recommend that book highly enough. If we can come down here now, Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey is one of those people that, wow. In this book, I did not put an author because so many people are written about Marcus Garvey, and there's so much information there. So what you get from most books, they're usually the same. One might contain more, but you hardly find a book on Marcus Garvey where there's a distortion of the facts, because he's been so widely written about. So it would be good to read about Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey, what he was able to accomplish in that short space of time. So for these people, they didn't live that long, Marcus Garvey, I think he died in his early 50s or thereabout, And but in that short space of time, what he did to reawaken that fire, that passion amongst Africans, my goodness, his reach, be it to, well, it's a shame really, but anyway, what's his name? John Henry Clark used to say Marcus Garvey, sadly, the Pan-Africanism that Garvinism, Marcus Garvinism, Pan-Africanism that he gave birth to in his home country like Jamaica, that doesn't seem to have taken hold. Isn't that anyway? It's one of those things, a prophet is without honor in his own home. But Marcus Garvey is one of those people that is greatly appreciated around the world. Again, you can talk. He influenced the early Africans, the early Pan-Africanists, and it's as if out of appreciation and gratitude, many African countries today, when you see their flags, you see the flags that Marcus Garvey used to use, which is the red, yellow, and green, and it is that in many African countries that shows you the level of gratitude Africans have towards Marcus Garvey. Even the Ghanaians even went further, where in the Ghanaian flag you see a black star. That black star was the logo of Marcus Garvey ship liner, which he had, which he established with the purpose of trying to take Africans back from America, because they wanted to go to Africa. So there's a lot one could say about Marcus Garvey. I highly recommend that. Anything about Marcus Garvey, please get and read. Not just the songs, we know lots of the songs, but read about him. Let your children know about Marcus Garvey. It is fantastic when you have all these heroes of ours that we must never allow to be forgotten by time. Talking of heroes of ours, Malcolm X. Malcolm X has to be one of my favorite. That man is somebody that came from the bottom and rose all the way to the top. When you talk of principle, Malcolm X. This book was written by he was assisted. It was an autobiography, but he was assisted by Alox Haley. Alox Haley is the same man that wrote Roots in the 70s, that was made into a film and television series that just blew, blew the minds of people when people saw what the African Americans had they got to America, the dramatization had they got to America, and what they went through. I mean, it was a phenomenal book. So one thing about Malcolm X, I love so much about Malcolm X, is that it's as if Malcolm X he progressed from civil rights. He took the argument onto human rights, and he was on a mission to take that to the United Nations. When mysteriously he was murdered, brutally murdered. I mean, it's very sad. But we should please look into this book. It's fantastic. Another book here. Before I go on to the next, let me just talk about his name. He's called Malcolm X, but he changed his name. Not many people know that he changed his name because he was originally born Malcolm Little, but he rejected that name for obvious reasons, and then he took on Malcolm X, and later on he became, because Malcolm X was by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that gave him the name. Then at his own time now he took up another name, which was El Haj Malik El Shabazz. That was his name, And he also visited Africa a lot. Amongst other countries he visited was Nigeria. And again too, like Marcus Garvey, the Africans just love Malcolm X. And in Nigeria, the elders that welcomed him, they did something beautiful. They gave him a name, which is Omowale. Omowale translates as, it's a Yoruba name, it translates as the son who came back. And yes, Malcolm X, he did come back. He found his roots, and that became one of his names. So, but registered, unfortunately, because of the short space of time before he passed on, his new chosen name did not stick. So people know him more as Malcolm X. The reason that I'm going on about his name, and also mention Alex Haley, is there's a thing about a name. Your name is special. Your name has to have value to the individual. I was talking about Alex earlier on, and I mentioned the book Roots. I once met, again, to all tied into miseducation and what I say, this whole concept of inferiority complex, one looking to the outside for a better thing. That's how we adopt all these other names. Some of it, like the African Americans or other people in the diaspora that left Africa, be it in the Caribbean, in Asia, and everywhere, their names, most of their surnames were forced upon them. So people like Malcolm X came to this realization and wanting to reclaim a level of their self-respect and African dignity, they changed their name. Why I mentioned the Alex Haley is this. Some years ago, I met this chap, very knowledgeable man, very clever man, somebody I had him in a very high esteem. Well, I still do. I still respect him dearly, because that is his choice. Anyway, we were talking about this. The conversation just drifted into this area of names, And he said, no, why would I change my name? Because that was when the whole DNA thing was coming. Why would I change my name? I can't be bothered with all that foolishness. That was his ways. I cannot be bothered with all that foolishness. And I've never forgotten him, because when I look back, because if you watch the movie Roots, I highly recommend you watch it. Watch the movie Roots. I cannot quite remember the whole story of Roots very well, but there's a scene I remember vividly. That is the scene where his captors were trying to force him to give up his African name of Kunta Kinte. They were beating Kunta almost to death, trying to give him another name. He would not accept it. He said, my name is Kunta Kinte. They beat this man so he was tied to the ropes and he was being flogged. You know, I think by 2 men, no, just it was vicious, so terrible. They almost beat him to death. He had to give up his name. And I've always thought about that saying, you know, that how would he have felt like if Kunta Kinte at that time could have looked into the future and see his descendants say to change their name, to reclaim their African name is foolishness. I say that because you have the choice. And one of the beauty about African names, they all have meanings. And I always say this about the people in the diaspora. If we can say, okay, let's look for something positive out of all this. Since you left Africa, now you have a claim, not to any one single country, but to the entire continent. To the entire continent. So you can choose and pick any name of your choice that has a meaning. I mean, wouldn't that be wonderful? And it just takes only one. I mean, I mentioned, oh, he's a proud man, Professor Kaba. Professor Kaba, I don't know, his name used to be Kulman Bukti, something like that, yeah, because he's written, but he used to change his name. I don't know what his new name means, Kaba Hatawa Kamene, I don't know what it means, but I heard him once say, and it's such a powerful meaning. His name seems to reflect his personality. I mean, you have the likes of Muhammad Ali. I mean, so many people that came to this realization, say, okay, I'm going to have a name of my choice. And when that one, sometimes it is just taking that those steps. One man does it and it becomes like, I cannot even imagine calling somebody like Professor Kaba Bukati, Kulman Bukati. Then it sounds so odd. But I want about Professor Kaba's, but that's it. I think he also names his children over great personalities in the past from Kemet, you know, about after gods and kings and all that, and that's one thing I find that the Americans are doing a lot now. I see many Americans, African Americans, that go back, find powerful names, be it gods, be it kings, be it queens, and adopt these names. I mean, you get names like IMHOTEP, Erujaroh. I mean, it's so warm when you see this happening in America. And this about names and all that, it's not only in America, and that's what is happening. I mean, when I was talking about how this miseducation has greatly affected us in Africa, among Africans, let me not insult anybody by saying shallow, but today we see lots of Africans giving up their African names. They have African names, but they intentionally give it up because they like the sound. Regardless of the fact that it's meaningless, they like the sound of certain European names. Isn't that sad? Isn't that sad? So you see an African, his first name is Western, his surname is Western. Incredible. And sometimes they deceive themselves to say, oh, it's a Christian name. What are you talking about? What's a Christian name? There is no such thing as a Christian name. Any name from the Bible is not Christian. His Hebrew, anglicized Hebrew name. There's nothing Christian about it. It's just the name, you take the name of another people. In this case, the names of the Hebrews. That's been anglicized, and then you call yourself all these names, and sometimes you go to some place, you see they call an African man, and or they put an announcement. Graham Davis, Peter Smith, and an African. And I'm not talking about African in the diaspora now. I'm talking about African in Africa, and African in Nigeria, and African in Ghana, and African. Come on, give me a break. Anyway, let's not go too much in that aspect. Another book here we should come. I would like you to consider is The Long Walk to Freedom. Nelson Mandela. I can talk about Nelson Mandela all day. One of my heroes. We know what Nelson Mandela did in terms of the sacrifices he made, but there's a lot more about this man. I urge you to read his books, and because it's a good thing when somebody writes an autobiography, just like Malcolm X. It is their own words, their own experiences, how they saw things, how they dealt with things, and you learn from their experiences. But this book is quite a chunky book. It's not here. It's quite a chunky book. Mandela really goes deep into it, and then you see his life story, and some of the little minor things one might take for granted. I was talking about this whole concept of this subliminal effects of miseducation. There's a story Mandela saying that his book, when for the first time, after being what's happening in South Africa terrible, he had an experience once when he came out of prison. He was about to enter an aircraft, and he almost freaked out when he saw that the pilot was a black man. And then he had to pull himself back together. What you do, But that is because of the years of apartheid South Africa, where they've been so brainwashed that they're no good, they cannot do anything for themselves, and all that nonsense. It had an effect on even such a great man, And this is what I'm saying. Even today, we greatly underestimated our capabilities, our God-given talents and abilities to soar to whatever heights we want to. So I like painting historical figures, but I've not yet painted Mandela. Maybe one day I'll paint Mandela. But what I did about Mandela, I did a walk a few months ago, sometime last year. It's still in my file. You can check it out if you want. I call that walk Batman's Long Wait for Mandela. You can check it out. I got that name from this title because sometimes my walks, the name sometimes is what inspires the walk. Sometimes I do the walk, and then after observing for a while, the name comes to me. With Batman's Long Wait for Mandela, I confined myself to using only the flags, the colors of the South African flag and the French flag. So yeah, look at it. There's an interesting story about that walk. If you've never heard of Sarah Batman, please look into it. Some of those things Mandela did, many things Mandela did that I have not recorded, but read his book, and then it gives you an insight into the man. Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom. Here we have neo-colonialism, the last stage of imperialism. There's also the tropical dependency. This was by Flora Shaw. Again, to the effect our interaction with the Western powers continue to have on us and it's affecting us today. These books are interesting, but of all these three books, my goodness, Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. This book is a must read. Tell you, if I can pull a magic wand, I will insist. Nobody in Africa, governmental level I'm talking about now, nobody in Africa should ever get to the position of financial leadership unless you've read and properly digested this book. I couldn't put it down. How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Walter Rodney, again, he's not an African. He's from Guyana. But again, like Africa, the whole of the Caribbean, they suffer the same problem. So as we Africans do, But Walter Rodney, he really breaks it down. The economic consequences of neo-colonialism, the tricks, we Africa, we're more or less in a trap. What is happening if you take a country like Democratic Republic of Congo, just put that country under a microscope and study that country closely. Closely. So even even the countries that are liberal, like my own country, Ghana, South Africa, all these countries, we are free. We seem to be free only in name. This book breaks it down. Written many years ago, but there's a formula that never changes. It is still there, and it is still being used to hold Africa back. So, oh my goodness, this is one of the best books I've ever read. Because what I must say, no, I mean, Nkrumah's book was good, but in terms of understandability, it's Walter Rodney. Walter Rodney was fantastic. This book he wrote, one of the finest books ever. I highly recommend this book. Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. You read this book and you see things differently. Fantastic. I didn't get time to go into this book. Born in Blackness by Howard French. This is another interesting read. Again, if I start to talk about every single book here, it's going to take a long time. But this is again another fantastic book. Born in Blackness. Highly recommended. We come up here now. There's a book of fiction here. It's called Anywhere But Here by AKPOMIEMIE Erujaroh. That is fiction anyway, But if you want to have a relaxed time, it's a little book. You can read it in a weekend. It's fiction. So why not? Have a go. In the first volume, I did show you a poster in the study of the young man that we saw on that poster. That poster is the cover of this book. So I didn't talk about it. I said it was going to take too much time. So just briefly, the cover of the poster in the young man's room in volume 1 of the bookshelf is the cover of Anywhere But Here. So please consider having a read. Interesting, even I can say that. Then we'll have the Rebirthing the African Consciousness. Rebirthing African Consciousness is by a Nigerian, again, my countryman. We're not doing too badly. My countryman, his name is Tamukuro. Yeah, say it slowly for you to get it. Tamukuro Erujaroh. This is a book he deals with. In volume 1, I mentioned the works of Hilliard, the reawakening of the African mind. What this book is similar to the works of the great American psychologist, historian, Hilliard, to reawaken that African consciousness. Because everything is consciousness. This book, he goes deep. How you see things, who you are, your place in the world, and how you interpret all these things. This is what his book is trying to do. Before I won't go too much about this one because it's origin of pagan origin of the Christ myth. We spoke about the Herbert Schweitzer's book. I showed you Schweitzer's book, Quest for the Historical Jesus. So you can tie that with this and look into that again. Many things we call the Christian belief system, you can see how they come from other practices. This is a great book by John G. Jackson. He used the pagan origin of the Christ myth. My only about it, I'm troubled by the word pagan, because when you say pagan, it gives a negative connotation. A pagan is nothing but somebody that does not share your belief. So if you are a Christian, to the Muslim, you are a pagan. If you are a Muslim, to the Muslim, a Christian is a pagan. To those that practice Judaism, everybody else is a pagan. Hinduism, everybody else is a pagan. So it's a pagan, basically somebody that does not share your belief. So it's not, in this context, it is not a negative word, and maybe we should try to say it in that vein. Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. Wade Nobles wrote this book, The Island of Memes. He gives it from the perspective of Haiti. He calls it Haiti's Unfinished Revolution. Even the title should tell you, Haiti's revolution is indeed unfinished. I mean, when you look at Haiti today, your heart just bleeds. Terrible what's happened to Haiti. Haiti on one side, Dominican Republic on the other side. You see the difference. Heaven and hell. I mean, it's incredible what the French, I don't know about the French, you know? I mean, oh God. Over the centuries, the world has seen the evil and barbarism of the transatlantic slavery and colonialism. Most European countries such as Britain, Spain, Italy, Portugal, Germany, lots of European countries have come to a great extent to become remorseful. And in their own ways, they are trying to make amends, be it by better trade relations or mutual respect with countries they once exploited. But not the French. The French, I mean, if you go back since the Napoleonic times, all successive French governments, they've seemed consistent in their determination to pursue a cause of exploitation, shameless ruthlessness, and vindictiveness towards everybody they come in contact with. I mean, in today's world, we live in a new age, in the 21st century, and many people are taught with the coming of the young Emmanuel Macron, the young guy, you know, things might be a bit different. But sadly, not so. I mean, it's like, what under Emmanuel Macron, all we can say is that it has proven the old adage that a leopard never changes the spot. So today, we see the French working in cahoots with the Americans in their bid to bring trouble to Burkina Faso, because the people of Burkina Faso say we don't want to be exploited no more. People of Niger as well, they said the same thing. Mali. But the French, they want to just continue to pursue this vindictive ruthlessness exploitation. They've become like a virus that just will not go away. I mean, what they try to do in Haiti today, they've done it before. The Americans and the French. They did it in Haiti when President Aristide was trying to stand up to them, similarly the way many Africans now trying to stand up to the French. You cannot be a parasite on us for too long. Please, in the name of God, go. Leave us alone. The French will not want to budge. But I must say, this time, things are about to change. Because what we see what we see in Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, and other parts of Africa, you might recall on the 30th of, not on the 30th, was it? Yeah, I think the 30th of April, we saw the uprising of the youth, not only in Africa, but different parts of the world. Because many people around the world now are wanting to stand with the Africans, saying to the French, as if responding to the cry of the great Bob Marley, no longer shall you kill our prophets while we stand beside and look. Enough is enough. So anyway, let's not get into the French. I mean, the French is it's so sad that they're not willing to change, but they have to change this time. So anyway, what this Noble did, he was looking at the problems of, because although he uses Haiti as his point of reference, but that he broadens it into, in my understanding anyway, he invites us to look at things from the African perspective to see how this can affect us. With Nobles has done a great deal of work in this whole issue of African enlightenment, reawakening our consciousness. So I highly recommend this book. We come to a book here called Weep Not Child, Ngungi Watongo. Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrongly, Ngungi Watongo. You can see here it seems quite big, but it's only a small book. I haven't got it at all. I haven't got the book. I'll just show you, but it's a small book like that. It's a very small book. It's a novel. It's a fiction. Weep Not Child. It's a book that I read many years ago when I was a schoolboy. We studied this book in school. I made it this big because it had such a great impression on me. But even then, as a child of about possibly about 13, 14, when I read that book, didn't quite understand the reality of it that much. But even as a young child, I never forgot what I learned from that book, and the stories, the effect, The book mainly deals about the relationship between Africans and the white settlers in colonial Kenya. I mean, it was about the bewildering dispossession of an entire people from their ancestral land. This thing about Africans fighting to regain their ancestral land, I think sometimes maybe some might not understand it that well. Europeans might not understand that our love, because I think that is what is happening in Palestine today. Many people don't seem to understand that it's something very deep in our psyche, our attachment to land. Because spiritually, most Africans, we've practiced before the coming of the Europeans. The best I can describe our spiritual practices back then is, say it's more or less pantheism. This is the philosophical and spiritual views that identifies the universe or nature with divinity. Basically, it means God is everything, is everywhere. Be it in the air, be it in the rivers, even in the plants, God is everywhere. He lives in us. And also, it also helps us in how we relate to our elders. We hold our elders in reverence, and we hold our ancestors in even higher reverence. So our ancestors and the land is all tied together. And that's what this whole thing about the Weep Not Child is all about. When the Kenyans said enough is enough and the Mau Mau uprising started, the Mau Mau fought. Without the Mau Mau, Kenya would never have gotten their independence. So this book is a fantastic read. I cannot recommend the book high enough. This issue about land, Africans understanding with the land, that it's something that goes very, very deep. Let me explain this. If you've watched the movie, for example, the Black Panther, that very successful film that came a few years ago, the Black Panther. There's a scene where T'Challa had to communicate with his ancestors. So he had to, let me just be brief, he was put into a trance and then he communicated with the ancestors and spoke to them, and then they spoke back to him. They gave him instructions and things like that. That is how we Africans use, many Africans today. Personally, I still talk to my dad. My dad is gone from this for a long time now. 20 years he's gone. I still talk to my dad, you know. I still talk to my grandparents. So for us, in my culture, for example, my Robo culture, our understanding of death is different. Nobody really dies. What we say is they've returned back from whence they came, or they've gone on with their lives. So we have a different concept of death. So the Europeans, when someone dies, you know, yeah, they go put beautiful flowers there. But Africans, no, we don't do flowers. We go there, we talk to them, we pay libations, we pour libations. We use drinks, spirit, alcoholic drinks. You can even use water. That is the relationship we have. Now, why am I going into all this African spirituality and all that? A few years ago, I was watching a thing on YouTube, and there was this group of men. It was in Namibia. They went to this place, this farm, and they were stopped by a lady. The lady said she is now the owner of the land, the farm. That these people needed permission to access this place. Mind you, it was a massive, massive place. Massive place. Massive. They call it like a reserve, you know. I mean, if I might even just digress, even that same Namibia, I'm watching this documentary where they were interviewing this guy. They were in this Range Rover. They were all driving for miles and miles and miles. And this guy was saying, "Oh yeah, it's on my land. Yes, I got the." He said, "It's your land." Yeah, he said, "Yes." He said, "It's your land. I got the land, and my great grandfather bought the land. He got all the documents." Your great grandfather bought the land. The documents written in Dutch. He said, "Yes, his great grandfather had the land." What is the size of this land, you might ask? 45,000 hectares. Then he said, "But that is bigger than Berlin." He said, "Yeah, I've got the documents to prove it." Oh my God. Anyway, back to this lady. So these three African fellows, Namibians, they went there. It was a land of big proportions. So they didn't say the size of it, but it was a massive land. And these guys were saying they wanted to go and pay homage and maybe pour libations for their ancestors. This woman said to them, "You cannot go. You need permission, and I'm not going to give you the permission." Oh God. And these three men, docile, they turned back, went away grumbling. And I said, "Oh my God." I mean, when I saw that thing, I was kind of, I come to realize one thing, that I think we are African, but I think we in the western part of Africa, well, let me also say Nigerians especially, you know, I think we've got a different temperament from our temperament, and that of our brothers in Southern Africa is quite different, you know. I mean, that is why during the apartheid times, why Nigeria and many countries around Africa, Western Africa, we did a lot to support, to bring an end to the apartheid government in South Africa. I mean, even you have a case where not even workers, civil servants, were willing to donate from their salaries. School-going children, were from their pocket money, donate money for the cause. Let's not go into what is happening in South Africa now because of the level of xenophobia, because again, that's all part of miseducation of the African mind, all this xenophobia, because when South Africans turn away from their true enemies and fight and want to kill their own African brothers. Let's not go into that, but I'm just trying to say how Africans feel. Then on that level, we Nigerians, I mean, you want to tell a Nigerian, you want to tell me not to go to where my forefathers are buried because you own the land that your great grandfather bought without. Oh God. In Nigeria, we have a common saying that today and today, man die but once. All I will say on that is that kind of, if I was a Kenyan back in the day, I would have been a proud member of the Mau Mau. Anyway, let us leave that aside. So that is that book, Ungungi Watongo. It's a little book. It's a fantastic, fantastic read. I highly recommend that book. It's great. We come to an introduction to African civilization. John G. Jackson, the same John G. Jackson that did the pagan origin of the Christ myth. Again, too, John G. Jackson is a fantastic writer. He's like John Henry Clark. He did lots of work. He's an American, did lots of work, African American, did lots of work in the whole thing about African history, trying to bring African history to light and enlighten the world. So I greatly recommend his work. Now, OLAUDAH Aquino. I'm working on a painting of him. You know, it's a very difficult thing for me to do because I've done 3 different sketches and none seems to work for me. You know, so I keep on. I will try to get it right, but I will do a work of his. You know, it's about slavery. You know, the thing about slavery is transatlantic slave trade. I don't like talking about it. I must say I shy away from the transatlantic slavery because as terrible as it was, as atrocious, terrible as it was, you know, I don't like talking about it. Maybe I will, like I said, I owe it to EQUIANO, and I'll also talk about Nzinga when the time comes. Then I will give up. I think it was John G. Jackson or John Henry Clark, I don't quite remember. He said, if you can compress the history of Africa into a book of 1,000 pages, the whole diabolical history of the transatlantic slave, I don't call it slave trade, not a trade, slavery, transatlantic slavery will come up only in page 950. A book of 1,000 pages now, you will come up at page 950 and might only take up 2 paragraphs. Why? Because the history of Africa is vast. It is rich. So I'm more interested in that history of that is vast, that is rich, that is incredible. The history that gave us the pyramids, the history that gave us an understanding of the universe, that gave us spirituality. That history is so vast. So why on earth would I want to be talking about slavery? It was terrible, but John Henry Clark said, I agree with him, when you start from slavery, it's as if you have no history before that. What's even worse, when you start from slavery, everything else after that becomes an improvement. No, that is terrible. I want to remember when my people, when we ruled. I'm not talking about ruling other people because Africans will not the type that Africans are not interested in going to dominate or conquer other people like you see or mother people. No, when we ruled ourselves, when we are at the height. So that is why I'm a bit reluctant when it comes to slavery. But Aquino, because of his accomplishments, that's why I introduced this book, and I'll do a work on him. Aquino is he was born in briefly. I just say brief about him now. He was born in 1745 and was captured from Africa, again from Nigeria, when he was about 11 years old or thereabout, and then captured and went into slavery, and basically traveled the world on the slave ships and all that, until he, very clever chap, he was able to educate himself, read and write, and eventually he got his own freedom, bought his freedom, became a free man, and spent the rest of his life in England. In England, in the 1780s, he joined and became one of the prominent figures in the British anti-slavery movement that eventually saw to the abolition of slavery. So those alone, you know, those accomplishments alone makes this man an incredible individual. I highly recommend his book. I will talk more about Aquino when I do a presentation on him. I'll do a presentation on him and talk more about him. So here, the next book here, we have the role of missionary in conquest. Without the missionaries, there will be no conquest of Africa. I mean, it was the same one coin with both slavery, colonialism, imperialism, and religion on the other side. So this book gives a great deal about that role religions play. And like I said earlier on, when I talk about the miseducation of African, religion continues to play a big role, a massive role in our lives. And it's not only Christianity. We must never forget that Islam, the Arabs, the Arabs through Islam were enslaving the Africans for so many years, for nearly 1,000 years before the Europeans even thought about the idea. So let us not excuse the Arabs. The Arabs greatly did. I mean, what is so sad about the issue of the Arabs even today is the fact that the Arabs today are even still engaged in slavery. I mean, it's hard to believe that in the year 2025, in countries like Mauritania and all those Arabic countries, top of Africa, they are still practicing the dastardly act of slavery. So it is worth looking into. There's a book here called The Historical Origin of Islam. This book, if you want to really broaden your mind, this book, Historical Origin of Islam, was written by the same author that wrote The Historical Origin of Christianity, and that is no other than Walter Williams. Walter Williams is an American that wrote this fantastic book that gives you the chronology, I can't even say that word, the chronology of events, how these religions all came together to what it is today. You see, he did a great, his research is quite in depth, and like writers such as Robert BAUVAL, he also provides photographs of his works, and then he presents them to you for you to see for yourself and then make up your mind. There is another writer here who is called Charles Finch. Charles Finch wrote the themes from An African Eden. I think it was playing on the word Eden there. But again, to my goodness, Charles Finch is more kind of on the spiritual side of things. He talks a great deal about the cosmos. That is what he deals on, in particular the cosmos. And if you want to know a lot about the Dogon people, you know, I mean, Charles Finch does a great deal about on the Dogon and things like that. But he's fantastic. I highly recommend you read Charles Finch's work. The final book on the list now is MOLEFI, KETE, ASANTE. Now you notice, first of all, it is just his name. There is no title, and he stands out. Blank, 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 blank. There are no other titles there because I didn't want to crowd him, you know. MOLEFI is MOLEFI Ashanti is one of those writers that, my goodness, he is Mr. Pan-Africanism. Through Afrocentrism, it is MOLEFI County, you know. It's beautiful, it's beautiful, it's beautiful. Why I only put this one book here, because I think I would be doing him a disservice if I put a title. I've only read about 5 of his books in my life, only about 5 of his books. And of those 5 books, who am I to say which is the best if they've been written by such a great man? But here is the real deal. MOLEFI KETE Ashanti has written over 90 books. 90. He's still alive. He's still alive. He's still there. He's still waxing strong. He's still lecturing. Over 90 books. Now, so there are about 85 books I'm yet to read. So who am I to say which is best? So MOLEFI County is a fantastic historian, a must read. I highly recommend his works. In terms of, he's an American, but again too, he's like Professor Kaba or Malcolm X and the great people like Muhammad Ali and such people that came to the realization of their identity and decided to change their names. So what I can't remember what his original name was. I just don't remember. But I listened to him some time ago when he gave an interview where he said he seems to love the Ghanaians. I don't know if he's connected to the Ghanaians. Maybe he's taken a DNA test and traces his road back to Ghana. But he seems to love the Ghanaians, and that's why he got this adopted his name. So he was saying when he did the name change, he told his father about it, and his father was very proud. His father was very happy for what he did. Now I cannot quite remember the details of it, but he said that I think his father did not have the wherewithal or maybe the knowledge of handling these things, you know. But the fact that he did it, you know, greatly gladdened his father's heart, you know. And I think it's a beautiful story, because there are those that are not in the right circumstances to do it, you know. But if you are in the right circumstances, I mean, so henceforth, many more Ashantis will come because one man made a difference. Many more Kamenis will come because Kaba made a difference. Many more will come because Malcolm made a difference. Today, his daughter is doing fantastically, and that is because of that. I mean, there is something about the name that you cannot overemphasize. I was talking about Lado Akwan earlier on, because I will talk more about him later on. But again, too, when he was brought out of Nigeria, his name was changed. He was given all these different names, and I think his final name was a Swedish name, you know, Gasto Vasco, something like that, you know. It skips my mind now. Anyway, come back to me. Anyway, when he wrote this book, because he remembered his roots, he remembered his identity, he wrote this book with his original name. So that is the name by which he is known today. And it's a name that will live forever. So it is the same thing with what all these people are doing, you know. Sometimes it takes just one man to do it. To just make that leap, and you change, you restore your dignity, you restore your self-pride and self-respect. Now, finally, let me come to this book now, gold-colored book here. If you recall, in volume 1, there was a book like that, gold colored, which I said was dedicated to great historians. Many I might not have read or are not listed here for their great works they've done towards this cause of African enlightenment, likes of Dr. Edward Robinson, Dr. Scobie, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Dr. Leonard Jeffries, my goodness, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, he's a bit like Professor James Smalls, no? Another living encyclopedia when it comes to the history of the world. And what I like about Professor Jeffries, he always talks of the African VIP. For him, the VIP stands for African values, African interests, and African principles. Once you can get these three right, everything seems to fall into place. The values, the interests, and the principles. Those are crucial to understanding our history. Because when a people don't know their history, they will equally not realize when that history, be it the negative or the positive, repeats itself. So the circle just continues. But you know the history, that thing is broken. And that is, you arm yourself with the African values, African interests, and African principles. Anyway, this has been quite a long one. So let us wrap it up now. All because it's history, it's going to be the last thing I've done because it's only volume 1 and 2, so this is the last of the volumes. If I come back again, it will be on EQUIANO or Queen Nzinga. But before we go, I would just like to remember the words of a great historian, one of my favorite historians, John Henry Clark. His definition of history is very beautiful, a bit more in depth than that of Runoko Rashidi. Runoko Rashidi only says history is a light that illuminates the past, is also the key into the future. John Henry Clark goes further. He said history is a clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. It tells the people where they have been, what they have been, where they are, and what they are. Most importantly, Dr. Clark went on, he said that history tells the people where they still must go and what they still must be. The relationship of history and the people is the same as the relationship between a mother and a child. Isn't that beautiful? John Henry Clark. His words will live forever. Anyway, my name is AKPOMIEMIE Erujaroh. It's been glad and wonderful having this time with you. I hope you can join me again when we do something of a similar nature. You can like, better still, you can subscribe. Once again,